ערב כזה לא היה מושלם בלי שנשמע מהרב מנחם גולדה מכובד. בבקשה.
I hope you don't mind if I speak in English. That's what they discussed with me already before this event. So for all those gold grandchildren that don't understand English, you better learn English. You come to Afula. My kids grew up in Afula. We're the only Americans, the only English speakers over there. And of all the grandchildren come out, they speak the best English. Anyway, so many beautiful things were said tonight. Everybody, you spoke beautifully, fantastic. No, Bemet. Each speech was a gem. And you know, about my father, you can go on and on. You know what? He did a lot of good things in his life. You know, he was pretty good. He was pretty good. You know, they say, Achrei Mos Kedoshim. You know, we knew my father was a good speaker. He was a good speaker. He was gifted. You know, how did Rabbi Leventhal say it? He's got it. He's got it. Some people's got it. But you know, we didn't know to what extent he impacted people's lives. People came over us by the Shiva. You don't know what your father was for us. You don't know what effect he had on our lives. People from all over the world. People that we didn't know. People that I don't think my father even know. My son, Yehuda, told me a story. I don't know if it's famous. Maybe you made it famous. This is incredible. Some guy from Lakewood, he got a hold of one of my father's speeches. I mean, I don't want to say Lashon Hara, but a guy from Lakewood that he was on the internet, chas v'chalila, you understand? You know? I don't know how he did it. But he got a hold of one of my father's speeches. And my father's talking about something strange that he never heard of before. Mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. He said, what's that? A new soft drink or something? Mitzvahs Yishuv Eretz, what's that? And the guy's listening. And he's tuned in and it begins to make sense. I don't know the exact details. Then he read my father's book. And you know what? This fellow decided he's going to make Aliyah. Now my father never met this guy before. Not only that, this guy has two buddies in Lakewood that he convinced, and he showed them also this material, and they made Aliyah. 3 families from Lakewood made Aliyah. My father didn't even know who they were. One of them, shortly before he died, before my father died, came to meet my father in Beit Tuvei Ha'ir. My father's impact was universal and global. We really didn't know to what extent. You know, he was really good. You know, I remember growing up in West Hempstead. You know, most people then, you know, Shabbos in the morning, that was the time they came to shul. You know, in America, shul is the matnas. It's the matnas. And at Shabbos in the morning is the time that everybody comes. My father would spend hours preparing the speech. I remember he would walk up and down the sidewalk over there on Rehov Colonnade, preparing the speech. And he used to say, he's got 12 minutes to give 500 people their Yiddishkeit for the week. And he's got to make it count. So we know he spoke very nicely, but to what extent he really affected people's lives, we didn't know. After each shiva, you know, and during the break, we would all sit there, all of us, like, wow, this was Abba? You know? Evidently, it was Dvorim Hayotzi Min Halev. His heart connected with people. I read or I heard the name of a famous rabbi from the United States that made Aliyah years ago. Yeah, Abba fights around with him too. You know, I don't know who, you know, they say about somebody, but the Chaver Knesset Gafni, you know, he's a big fighter. You know, they spoke about Degel HaTorah. Somebody spoke about Degel HaTorah tonight, yeah? So he's my boss. You know, he's my boss. You know, everybody's got a boss. Everybody's got a boss. So he's a big fighter. You know, you don't start up with him. And they say he wakes up in the morning and he asks his wife, well, look at my schedule. Do I have anybody to fight with today? And she looks over and says, nah, he goes back to sleep. So, you know, I say about my father, in the last few years, people would ask me, how's your father doing? And I said, he's hanging in there. He's still the angry man of Yerushalayim. He's still the angry man of Yerushalayim. So anyway, I heard in the name of a very articulate and keen observation about a famous American rabbi, that he was a rabbi many years ago, and he said this week, this is decades ago, it's about 50 years ago, and he said, you know, this week there's 2 funerals taking place in the world. 2 big funerals, and there's going to be thousands and thousands of people, and it appears that each one is a very special and important person. One in Eretz Yisrael was the Levi of the Ger Rebbe. Well, you want to know which Ger Rebbe? I'll tell you about the other Levi. He was also called the King, Elvis Presley. It was the funeral of Elvis Presley. He was called the King, you know. It was the same week as the Ger Rebbe. There was thousands of people at each Levi. So this rabbi said it looks like each one is really choshev and important, and very influential. But at the Levias, you may not be able to tell the difference between the 2. You know what, you're going to be able to tell the difference in the aftermath. What's going to come afterwards, what people are going to come forward with when the truth is going to come out. And about the Ger Rebbe, we're going to find out, and we did find out, whichever Ger Rebbe it was, that the tzidkus and the greatness and the chesed that we saw was only a tip of the iceberg, but there was a tremendous hidden greatness that was hidden and not seen by the public eye. His real godless came out afterwards. Lahavdil bein hakodesh ubein hachol. Elvis Presley was a great singer, but how immoral he was, how much he damaged, ruined his family, what a drug addict he was, what a hedonistic and selfish life he led. So you can tell the difference between the 2 in the days and the weeks afterwards. Saba, we're still mamish knocked out from the shiva, from everything that we've heard about our father. What an impact, what an influence he had on so many people's lives. But you know what? Everybody's been talking about the great things that our father did. But I got to tell you something. It wasn't always so rosy, and you got to know something. My father went through some very, very difficult times. And that's what I want to touch upon. Very difficult times. There were at least 2 times in his life where he was really about ready to throw in the towel, and that's it. Raise the white flag, and that's it. Without getting into too much detail, my father was 24 years old, and the Balabatim from Toronto came to Rabbi Ruderman, and they said, you know what? We want a yeshiva like yours in Toronto. So without skipping a beat, without any second thoughts, Rav Ruderman says, wait a second. And he walks into the base medrash, and he walks right over to Reb Sholom Gold, who was a bachelor at the time. He says, you're going to Toronto. You're going to Toronto to start a yeshiva. He came to Toronto, he didn't realize you can't have a yeshiva without Talmidim. Nobody wanted to come to the yeshiva. After grade 9, they all sent to public schools. It was the aftermath of the Holocaust. Everybody wanted, my son the doctor, my son the lawyer. Who wanted to send to a yeshiva? My father had to convince everybody. He started off with 11 students. He spent hours and hours with each one. The second year in the yeshiva, he ran into a jam. The class, the elementary school that fed into the high school was Eitz Chaim, right? That was the only school in town. No haters Seder's, no Schmaders, no nothing. Eitz Chaim. And nobody wanted to send. My father was ready to pack his bags and go back to Baltimore. He had his chavrusas waiting for him. He'll go back to Baltimore. He tried. Didn't work. But he said, I'm going to give it another crack. And he found out who the best bocher, the best student in the class was. And he went to work on him. And he went to work on his parents. And it was a big fight. It was a big fight. And it was do or die. It was do or die. But he didn't give up. Finally convinced the boy and his parents to send, and the rest of the class followed suit. After 5 years, there were 120 boys in the high school, 127 in the high school, and 40 in the base medrash. And this was the only Makom Torah in the whole Canada, And things were going well. My father was working 18 hours a day. I don't think I barely ever saw Saba, my father, when I was really young. He was everything. You know, there was no layers of management. The boiler broke in the middle of the night, he went. My father would do anything in order that the yeshiva should succeed. He taught grade 9 Bekiyas, and he taught one time they needed an English literature teacher. So he did that. They needed an English principal. Many of his Talmidim says, your father was my English principal. He was ready and willing, and he actually did anything and everything in order that the yeshiva should succeed. Unfortunately, things took quite a sour turn. There was a sour turn of events. And without getting into too much detail or any detail, my father had to leave. And it wasn't of his own will. He was told in no uncertain terms, you have to leave. Can you imagine, this is his baby? For 11 years, day and night, he put his neshama into this, and the yeshiva was growing fantastic. Toronto was becoming a Makom Torah. My father he had the city in the palm of his hand. And here he gets a big boot. We were very, very little at the time. We didn't really understand what was going on, but I can't begin to describe what was going through him. He felt betrayed. His life was over. He had nothing to do. Where's he going to go? What's he going to do? It's extremely, extremely difficult, but you know what? He bounced back. He got the job in West Hempstead, and those 10 years in West Hempstead were the most productive years in his life. He built a shul, he built the mikveh, the Eruv. It was fantastic. But then again, it wasn't always, a garden of roses. He finally made the decision to come to Eretz Yisrael. His lifelong dream were finally coming to the Holy Land. And I'm not going to get into too much detail over here, but my father always says you need 2 jobs to make Aliyah. There's the job that brings you to Eretz Yisrael, and then there's the job that you actually work at. My father had a job here, and it was basically over the moment he stepped foot in Eretz Yisrael. And here he is with 5 children. You know, not such easy children to handle. At least 4 of them are not too easy to handle. Okay, we were all teens, a little bit more than teens. My parents put down money for an apartment in some far-off place. They called it Givat Shaul Bet, which became Harnov. The Kablan went bankrupt. And here he's out of a job. He's got a bunch of children to marry off. Each one is struggling with his own misgeret, and it looks like life is simply falling apart. And the thought of Rabbi Gold, the big Oev Eretz Yisrael, the big promoter, advocate of Aliyah, going back to the United States, you know what a bizayon and humiliation that would be. Yes, we all know the famous story. My father says he has a job. My mother says, yeah, take it. Don't forget to send the check. My father was looking for my mother to say that. There was no way my father was going to go back. And it really looked like that was it. That was it. But you know what? He bounced back again. And it was back to the wall. He turned over the world and he built the shul and the JCA and they started giving shiurim. And for decades afterwards, he was a source of inspiration and Torah influence throughout Yerushalayim and Eretz Yisrael. You know, the Maharal says, Im ein hefsid ein havaya. Every great step or every great creation has to have a churban before that. I just want to end off. I want to end off with something like, reminds me what my father's life was like Rebbe Akiva. I just want to end off with a Maimer Chazal. I've said this before, but it's worthwhile saying it again. The Medrash is in Chayei Sarah, and Rebbe Akiva's Talmidim are falling asleep. They're falling asleep. So Rebbe Akiva wants to wake them up. He says, you know what? Why was Esther Zochet to ruling over 127 countries? You know why? In the schus of the 127 years of sorrow. That's the Medrash. The Medrash makes no sense from beginning till end. First of all, what do you mean Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim fell asleep? He was a boring Maggid Shir? He was a boring man. He had 24,000 Talmidim. He had more Talmidim than Mir and Yerushalayim and Lakewood put together. You know? I don't think he was a boring Maggid Shir. And when somebody falls asleep, the last thing you're going to do is tell him a Dvar Torah unless you want him to fall into a deeper slumber. You don't wake somebody up by telling them a Dvar Torah. That's the last thing you're going to do. What's going on over here? I'll tell you Pshat. I'll tell you Pshat. Pshat is as follows. They didn't fall asleep because they were bored. It was one of the most difficult periods of Jewish history. They wouldn't let Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues teach Torah. There was Gzero Shmat. It was the aftermath of the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. The Jewish people felt this is the last stop. And the conductor yells, everybody off. The game is over. The Jewish people have come to their end. We have risen, reached great heights like all other empires, and we have fallen as well, and we are going to fade away. The Gemara says in Bava Basra, they wanted to make a gzera. Nobody should get married. What's the point of having children? The game is over. So Rabbi Akiva knew he had to give them a pep talk. You're down by 2 touchdowns and it's 2 minutes left in the game. You know, and so the coach has got to give his quarterback, Tom Brady, you know what I mean? He's got to come up with something really good. And Rabbi Akiva says, you know what? Sarah, Rashi says, Shnei Chayei Sarah, Kulon Shovin Letova. All her years were equally good. They were equally terrible. She couldn't have children. Hashem promises them, come to Eretz Yisrael, it's going to be great. There's famine. She comes to Egypt, Paro grabs her. She comes back, can't have children. Hagar has a child. Hagar makes trouble for her. They go down to Gaza. Avimelech grabs her. It's a terrible life. What does it mean by Sarah Kulon Shavin Letova? You know where Rabbi Akiva was telling his Talmud? She had a terrible life, but what did she do with it? How did she look at life? Did she fall apart at the seams every time something didn't go right? Or she woke up in the morning every day, no matter how difficult it was, she gave 110% every day. So B'schus, that Sarah did not fall apart and did not allow that bleak, dark future to affect her day-to-day input, Hashem gave her a future that never would have dreamt of, that her great-great-granddaughter will rule over the entire world. Rabbi Akiva was telling his Talmud, you want to throw in the towel, the game is over? Let's learn from Sarah. Right now, there's a Rambam, there's a Rashba, there's a place to work on. Do it today. Tomorrow there's going to be a nuclear war. Tomorrow there's a nuclear war. Lord. Today you have a chance, do it. And it's going to come tomorrow. You'll give it all you've got tomorrow. Don't worry about the dark, bleak future. And just like Hashem gave Sarah an incredible, a supernatural, a future that Esther ruled over the world, you're going to see, you guys. You're going to learn hard. You're going to give it all you've got. There's going to be a Rambam and a Rashi and a Gra and a Taisus Gedolei Olam are going to come out of you guys. Don't give up. Don't give up. I think he was called Rebbe Akiva. Akiva is from Akev, it means the end. He would see destruction and Churban around him, but his mind was always focused to the end of days, to Yemos HaMashiach. I think my father was that type of person. Baruch Hashem, he did not live in such difficult times, but he was always able to see the good of Yerushalayim, the good of Eretz Yisrael, the good of other Jews. You know, he couldn't stand things are so good and people see the bad in what's going on. He was able to eloquently and lucidly and clearly portray the beauty, the good, the greatness that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has done for all of us. Bezrat Hashem, he should be a Melech Yosher for all of us. And I'm going to a little bit paraphrase my brother, what he said at the Levi, but it was a good word with my embellishment. You know, it's still the summer, and if you're going to hear some thunder coming from upstairs in the next few days, don't get worried. It's my father fighting it out with the Satmar Rebbe over there. They're fighting it out over there, and I think we know who's going to win. So, but anyway, my father has had a tremendous career, and it's quite a difficult act to follow. Bezrat Hashem, he and Ima up there should be the dynamic duo up there and pull strings for all of us, that Hashem should rid us of all of our enemies. There shouldn't be any tsuris, shouldn't be any yisurim, and we should have the tov ha'amiti bezrat Hashem. Bebias goel tzedek b'mheira v'yameinu amen.
תודה לכל הדרשנים. אין לי ספק שהנשמה בשמיים עלתה כמה וכמה מדרגות בזכות כל הדברים שנאמרו פה הערב. תודה לכולם שהשתתפו, כולם שבאו. כמו אחרי כל קונצרט והופעה טובה, אז גם פה יש למטה ספרים של מורי וחומי ז"ל וחוברות חדשות שהודפסו לאחר פטירתו. תודה שבאתם, אנחנו מאחלים לכולם כתיבה וחתימה טובה, שנה טובה ושיהיו רק בשורות טובות.